I never thought my life would twist into a nightmare like this, but here I am, sharing my truth. My name is Michael, and I used to believe in the simple American dream, a quiet life built on love, trust, and family. After my first marriage ended, I was blessed with my son, Tyler, who quickly became the center of my universe. When I met Brittany, I thought I'd finally found the fresh start I needed. She was vibrant, charming, and full of life, the kind of woman who could light up any room with just her smile. I was eager to move forward, to build a new chapter filled with hope and promise. In the early days, everything seemed just right. Brittany's laughter filled our home, and our shared moments with Tyler painted a picture of a perfect, blended family. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have both a loving son and a woman who brought energy and excitement back into my life. We spent long evenings talking about our dreams, planning future vacations, and laughing about the little things that made life worth living. At first, I dismissed any worry as mere nerves. Perhaps I was just anxious about merging two very different worlds. But as time went by, I began to notice small things that didn't quite add up. There were moments when Brittany's smile didn't reach her eyes, and times when she'd laugh a bit too heartily at Tyler's jokes. A laugh that, oddly enough, felt too familiar. I'd catch her glancing in his direction when she thought I wasn't looking. A secretive look that sent an uncomfortable chill down my spine. I tried to rationalize these incidents, chalking them up to stress or the quirks of someone who was still adjusting to a new life. I convinced myself that every couple goes through bumps in the road, and that these minor oddities were nothing more than temporary lapses. Work was a welcome distraction for me, a steady routine that kept my mind occupied. I'd clock in every morning, put in a full day's work, and return home with the hope that the familiar warmth of family would ease any lingering doubts. Yet, with each passing day, that sense of comfort began to fade. Brittany started making secretive phone calls at odd hours, her hushed tone betraying conversations I wasn't meant to hear. I'd find her retreating into corners of our home, whispering to herself or laughing softly, as if sharing a private joke with someone unseen. Each of these little moments felt like a tiny crack in the solid foundation I'd built, and I couldn't help but wonder what they meant. There were evenings when I'd sit quietly in the living room, listening to the hum of the air conditioner and the ticking of the clock, and the silence would speak volumes. I'd glance at family photos on the wall, the happy faces from happier times, and feel an inexplicable sadness creeping in. I couldn't shake the growing suspicion that beneath Brittany's bubbly exterior lay secrets too dark to imagine. It wasn't just the late-night phone calls or the furtive looks exchanged when Tyler walked by. It was a feeling, a gut-wrenching intuition that something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. At first, I tried to ignore these signs. I told myself that perhaps I was just overthinking, that the stress of blending our lives was making me see things that weren't really there. I wanted to believe in the love we had built, in the promises we'd made to each other long ago. But the more I tried to push away the unease, the louder it grew inside me. A persistent drumbeat of doubt that wouldn't let me rest. I started losing sleep, tossing and turning in bed as images of Brittany's secretive smiles and Tyler's knowing glances haunted my every thought. Tyler, my precious son, had always been a beacon of light in my life. I'd watched him grow with pride and hope, believing that he'd never be capable of doing anything to hurt our family. Our bond was built on years of shared laughter, tears, and unspoken understanding. So when I began to notice moments that suggested an unusual closeness between him and Brittany, I felt a twist in my gut that I couldn't ignore. It was as if an invisible line had been crossed, and every laugh and every whispered conversation between them began to sting a little more. I tried to hold on to the memory of how things used to be, the early days of our relationship, when Brittany was as open and honest as the clear blue sky. I remembered long, lazy summer afternoons filled with hope, when we'd share our dreams without a hint of hesitation or suspicion. But lately, those memories felt like relics of a bygone era, overshadowed by a growing, inescapable sense of betrayal. Every time Brittany would lean in a little too close to Tyler, every time her eyes would meet his in a way that seemed too loaded with meaning, I felt the fragile threads of my trust snap a little further. One quiet evening, I sat alone in our dimly lit living room, the silence amplifying the relentless buzz of my thoughts. I stared at the family photo that once symbolized everything I held dear. a snapshot of laughter and love that now seemed like a cruel joke. In that moment, I realized that the picture-perfect life I'd been trying so hard to build was nothing more than a facade. The cracks had widened into gaping chasms, and I was forced to confront the possibility that my entire world was built on lies. I never wanted to see this coming. I had believed in the sanctity of marriage, in the idea that love could heal old wounds and create new beginnings. I had trusted Brittany with my heart, with my hopes for a future where trust and honesty would prevail. Instead, I found myself standing at the edge of a precipice, with doubts and fears swirling around me like a violent storm. The early hints of trouble, which I had once dismissed as mere misunderstandings, were now screaming at me with undeniable clarity. I knew deep down that the life I had cherished was unraveling before my eyes. In writing down these early memories, I want you to understand the weight of what I was beginning to face. A slow, creeping realization that the person I had welcomed into my life might not be who she appeared to be. This is the starting point of a painful journey. A journey that would force me to question everything I believed in about love, family, and trust. Even as I write these words, I can still feel the cold grip of fear mixed with a profound sorrow that I never knew existed in me. And while I can't yet see the full scope of what lies ahead, I know one thing for sure. Nothing will ever be the same again. With each passing day, the signs grew more insistent, and my heart grew heavier with the burden of secrets. I tried to cling to the hope that maybe, just maybe, I was wrong, that the cracks in our life were only temporary. But as the shadows lengthened and the truth threatened to spill over, I found myself trapped between denial and an ever-looming dread. This introduction isn't just a recitation of events. It's the raw, unfiltered account of a man who believed in love and family, only to have his world upended by betrayal. And though I may not have all the answers now, I must begin to face the truth, however painful it may be. This is where my story starts, a story of shattered trust, of a life that began to crumble under the weight of secrets. I lay this all out for you in the hope that you understand the gravity of what I was beginning to endure. It was the calm before the storm, the quiet moments that held the promise of a better tomorrow, even as the dark clouds of deceit gathered on the horizon. I wish I could tell you there was some grand revelation, some lightning strike of clarity that told me exactly what was going on. But the truth didn't hit me all at once. It bled in, slow and merciless, like water dripping into a crack until the whole foundation gives way. It started on a regular Tuesday evening, nothing special. I came home from work early, hoping for a quiet night with Brittany and Tyler. The house was unusually silent, no TV blaring, no clatter from the kitchen. That silence, it wasn't the peaceful kind. It was thick and uncomfortable, like walking into a room just after someone's had a screaming match and pretended nothing happened. I called out, "Britt, Ty, you guys home?" No answer. The living room was empty, and the air felt heavy, like it was holding a secret too big to stay hidden. I set my briefcase down, trying to shake off the feeling creeping up my spine, and headed upstairs. That's when I heard it. Whispers. Low, urgent voices from behind the closed door of our bedroom. My heart sank. I couldn't make out the words, but there was something off about the tone. Too soft, too intimate. I told myself it had to be nothing. Maybe Brittany was on the phone. But then I heard a laugh, a soft chuckle that I knew too well. It wasn't hers. It was Tyler's. The sound hit me like a punch to the gut. My head spun, trying to piece together any logical explanation that didn't involve the terrible conclusion clawing its way into my mind. I stood frozen in place, my hand hovering inches from the door handle, debating whether to confront whatever was happening on the other side, or just walk away and pretend this moment never existed. But some instincts are stronger than fear. I needed the truth, no matter how much it would break me. I pushed open the door. There they were. Brittany sat on the edge of the bed, her hand resting lightly on Tyler's knee, in a way no stepmother should ever touch her stepson. They jumped apart like guilty children caught sneaking candy, but the damage was done. The room went dead silent, thick with the scent of betrayal. Tyler's face turned pale, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't find the words. Brittany, though, she was quicker. "Michael, this isn't what it looks like," she said, voice dripping with forced sweetness, her eyes wide with faux innocence. I couldn't even respond. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Every fiber of my being screamed that this wasn't a misunderstanding, but some twisted game that had been going on behind my back for God knows how long. Tyler looked away, his shame written all over his face. That alone said everything I needed to know. You care to explain? My voice came out low, almost too calm for the storm brewing inside me. Brittany scoffed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. You're acting like something's happening here. We were just talking. God, Michael, don't be paranoid. I took a step closer, my gaze never leaving hers. Then why does my son look like he's about to throw up? And why the hell are you sitting so close? Her mask cracked for a split second, just enough for me to see the flicker of panic behind her eyes before she covered it with anger. Maybe if you weren't so distant lately, you'd understand how lonely I've been, she snapped, flipping the blame so smoothly it was almost impressive. You're never home, always working late, and I needed someone to talk to. Tyler's been there for me. I turned to my son, the boy I had raised, taught how to ride a bike and comforted through every scraped knee and teenage heartbreak. His eyes were wet, and for a second, I saw that little boy again, the one who used to look up to me like I was his hero. But now, all I saw was guilt. How long? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. How long has this been going on? Tyler couldn't meet my eyes. Dad, it wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean... That was all I needed. The words hung there, raw and unfinished, but enough to cut me deeper than any confession ever could. I turned away, fists shaking, rage bubbling beneath the surface like a volcano ready to erupt. My heart wasn't just breaking, it was shattering into pieces I knew I'd never put back together. Get out, I said finally, not daring to look at either of them. Brittany's voice went sharp and venomous. You're being ridiculous, this isn't... Get out, I roared, the dam finally breaking. The silence that followed was suffocating. I heard Tyler's footsteps shuffle past me, and then Brittany's heels clicking on the hardwood floor as she left the room. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving me standing there in the wreckage of my trust. I sank onto the bed, burying my face in my hands, the weight of betrayal crushing down on me, my son, my wife. How the hell had my life spiraled into this mess? And yet deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The real pain hadn't even started yet. I don't remember how long I sat there in the dark, staring at the cracks in the walls as if they could offer me some kind of answer. Minutes, hours. It all blurred together into a dull, throbbing ache in my chest. My thoughts circled in endless loops, each one worse than the last. How long had this been going on? Was it my fault? What did I miss? The worst part was the silence that followed their departure. The house, once filled with the sound of laughter, felt like a tomb now. I could still hear echoes of those late-night conversations, the secret whispers behind closed doors that I'd brushed off as nothing. Every memory now felt poisoned. But I wasn't going to let this end quietly. I needed answers. I deserved them. I found Brittany in the kitchen the next morning, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. She wore that same smug mask she always did when she thought she was in control, her blonde hair falling perfectly over her shoulders, as if betrayal was just another part of her morning routine. You got something to say? I asked, my voice cold and sharp enough to cut glass. She glanced at me over the rim of her mug, unfazed. You're still on this? I took a step forward, fists clenched tight enough that my knuckles turned white. Still on this? I caught you with my son, my own goddamn son, and you're standing here acting like I'm the problem? Her expression didn't even flicker. You're being paranoid, Michael. Nothing happened. I let out a bitter laugh. You really think I'm that stupid? She set her mug down slowly, a smug little smile playing at the corner of her lips. You've always been insecure. Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of burying yourself in work, none of this would have happened. There it was, her classic deflection, turning the blame around like a pro. I'd seen her twist words before, make small arguments feel like they were entirely my fault. But this wasn't some petty disagreement about who forgot to take out the trash. This was betrayal on a level I couldn't even comprehend yet. I gave you everything, I said, my voice shaking now, not with fear but rage. I brought you into my home. I trusted you with my family. And you threw it all away. She rolled her eyes, arms crossing over her chest. God, Michael, you're so dramatic. You act like Tyler and I are having some torrid affair. We're just close. Maybe too close. But it's not what you think. Then what is it? I demanded, taking another step toward her. Explain the way you touched him. Explain the way he looked at you. Like a man ashamed of what he's done. Her facade finally cracked, just for a second. A flicker of guilt, or maybe just fear of getting caught, flashed in her eyes before she replaced it with cold indifference. I'm done with this conversation, she snapped, brushing past me like I was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. You're delusional. I stood there watching her walk away, feeling that familiar mixture of fury and helplessness boil inside me. But as much as I wanted to confront her again, drag the truth out of her, scream until the walls crumbled, it was pointless. She wasn't going to give me the closure I needed. I had to get it another way. Later that night, I found Tyler outside, sitting on the back porch, head in his hands. He didn't hear me approach, didn't look up when I sat down next to him. The air between us was thick, heavier than it had ever been. Ty, I started, my voice low, almost gentle. I need you to be straight with me. He wiped his eyes quickly, as if that could hide the fact he'd been crying. Dad, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I took a slow breath, fighting every instinct to lash out. I'm not here to yell, I just need the truth. There was a long pause, heavy with the weight of unspoken guilt. She came onto me first, he finally said, his voice cracking under the pressure. At first, I thought it was just, I don't know, playful. But then she started texting me when you weren't around, saying things that didn't feel right. I should have stopped it. I should have told you. My stomach twisted. Did anything happen? He shook his head violently. No, I swear, she kissed me once and I pulled away. After that, I tried to avoid her, but she kept pushing. I didn't want to hurt you, Dad. For a moment, the rage faded, replaced by something worse. Disappointment, not in him, but in myself. Had I really been so blind? Had I missed the signs that my own son was trapped in something he couldn't escape from? This isn't your fault, I said finally, placing a hand on his shoulder. You should have told me, but she's the one who crossed the line. He nodded, tears streaming down his face now, the weight of his shame pouring out like water from a broken dam. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I pulled him into a rough hug, holding on to him like I was afraid he might slip away completely. We'll get through this, I promise. But even as I said the words, I wasn't sure if that promise was one I could keep. The days that followed were a blur of anger, exhaustion, and quiet devastation. The house, once filled with laughter and family meals, turned cold and silent. Tyler stayed in his room most of the time, guilt weighing on him like an anchor around his neck. And Brittany, she acted like nothing had happened, going about her days with that same smug expression, as if she hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of our family. But the worst part? She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I'd catch her smirking when I walked into the room, like she was daring me to confront her again. The tension in the house was suffocating. Every little sound felt like a gunshot in that deafening silence. Plates clinking too loudly at dinner, doors shutting with too much force. It was as if every inch of the house was screaming for this nightmare to end. I spent my nights on the couch, drinking too much whiskey and staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell I let this happen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Her hand on his knee, that flicker of guilt in Tyler's eyes, the venom in Brittany's voice. The betrayal carved itself into my mind, fresh and sharp like a brand on my soul. One night, a week after the confrontation, I found Tyler sitting in the kitchen, the fridge light casting long shadows across his tired face. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. You okay, kid? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He didn't look up. No, Dad, I'm not. I pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. The silence stretched between us for a long time before I finally broke it. This wasn't your fault, Ty. I need you to understand that. His hands clenched into fists on the table. I let her get too close. I should have told you sooner. Maybe if I had, none of this would have happened. Hey! I reached across and grabbed his arm, forcing him to meet my eyes. She manipulated you. She's the adult. She's the one who crossed the line, not you. You hear me? His lips trembled as he nodded, but the guilt didn't leave his eyes. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just hurt the victim. It poisons everything around it. I knew we couldn't keep living like this. The next morning, I made up my mind. Brittany was in the living room, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. I stood there for a moment, just watching her. Every fiber of me wanted to scream, to demand answers she'd never give me, but what was the point? She didn't care. Without a word, I grabbed a suitcase from the closet and started packing her things. Clothes, shoes, every little reminder of the life we'd built together. I shoved it all into that damn suitcase like I was stuffing down the rage burning inside me. It didn't take long for her to notice. What the hell do you think you're doing? Her voice was sharp, like shattered glass. I didn't stop packing. You're leaving. Her laugh was cold, almost amused. You can't just kick me out. This is my home too. I zipped the suitcase shut with finality and turned to face her. Not anymore. You made sure of that. Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time I saw the cracks in her armor, real fear flickering beneath all that arrogance. You have no proof of anything, Michael. You'll look crazy if you try to take this anywhere. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I don't need proof. I just need peace. You're leaving today, Brittany. If you're smart, you'll go quietly. For a second, I thought she might fight me on it. But then she smirked, grabbing the suitcase handle with a flick of her wrist. Fine, you'll be begging for me to come back once you realize how much you need me. I followed her to the door, every step like tearing open an old wound. She paused on the threshold, turning back with one last venomous shot. You're nothing without me, Michael. Just a sad old man with a broken family. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The door slammed behind her, and just like that, the weight lifted. The days after Brittany left weren't easy. The silence was still there, but it wasn't suffocating anymore. It was peaceful, like the house could finally breathe again. Tyler came downstairs more often, and we started having meals together, talking about anything but what had happened. I didn't push him for details. I didn't need to. The important thing was that he knew I didn't blame him. One night we sat on the porch, watching the stars blink against the black sky. Dad? His voice was soft, hesitant. Yeah? Do you hate me? The question hit harder than any punch ever could. I turned to him, my heart breaking all over again. I could never hate you, Ty. You're my son. You'll always be my son. A tear slipped down his cheek, and I pulled him into a hug, holding on like it was the only thing keeping me grounded. We're gonna get through this, I promised him. Together. After Brittany left, the house felt emptier, but in a way that was almost peaceful. The poison she brought with her was gone, and for the first time in weeks I could breathe without feeling like I was drowning. Tyler and I didn't talk about her much. We didn't need to. The damage had been done, but I could see the weight slowly lifting off his shoulders. The shame in his eyes started to fade, replaced by something resembling relief. We spent more time together, simple things like fixing up the old car in the garage or watching late-night baseball games on TV. Every shared laugh was another crack in the wall between us, slowly breaking down the barrier that betrayal had built. But healing wasn't just about forgetting. It was about learning to live with what had happened and not letting it define us. One night, Tyler finally spoke up. Dad, do you think we'll ever be okay again? I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I didn't just see the kid who got caught up in Brittany's manipulation. I saw a man who had survived something dark and ugly. Yeah, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. We'll be okay. It's gonna take time, but we'll get there. And that was the truth. The betrayal would always be a scar, but scars fade. They don't hurt forever. Months passed. Brittany didn't come back, didn't call, didn't try to twist the knife any deeper. Good riddance. Tyler started going to therapy, and I did too. We both needed it more than we cared to admit. The guilt he carried slowly turned into acceptance, and the anger inside me dulled into something quieter, an understanding that some people are just broken, and it's not your job to fix them. The biggest lesson I learned? Trust is fragile. It can take years to build and seconds to destroy. But forgiveness, that's a different kind of strength. I didn't forgive Brittany, and I probably never will, but I forgave myself for not seeing the signs sooner. I forgave Tyler because what happened wasn't his fault. One evening, as we watched the sun set from the back porch, Tyler turned to me and said, "Thanks for not giving up on me." I pulled him into a quick hug, the kind fathers give their sons when words aren't enough. Never gonna happen. This wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the life I had now. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The past was behind us, and the future, whatever it held, was ours to rebuild. Together.